lawn border with concrete mix. Building concrete lawn borders is an affordable DIY project that adds curb appeal to your home by adding definition to the landscape. These borders can be poured in different sizes, contours, and even colors. And because concrete is so durable, they won't rot, warp, or deteriorate. Before you begin this project, move any mulch or rock from the perimeter of your beds, mark the outline you want, and use a shovel to cut along the layout line. The top of the border can be at ground level or slightly above it to separate planting beds from the lawn. Concrete borders should be at least 3.5 inches thick and should extend a minimum of 2 inches into the ground to anchor them and prevent shifting or cracking. Once you decide on the dimensions, dig a trench along the layout line about 1/2 inch to 1 inch deeper than your border requires to allow for variations in the terrain. The trench should be 2 to 3 inches wider than the width of the intended border. Keep the walls of the trench as vertical as possible so they support the forms. Use a square shovel to level the bottom of the trench and compact the soil before you begin building your forms. 1/4-inch plywood is the ideal material for border forms because it's flexible enough to be used for both straight and curved border shapes. Cut the plywood sheets into strips along their length based on the desired depth of your border. You'll also need plenty of 1x2 stakes about 12 inches long to hold the plywood forms in place. First, position the form in the trench and then drive a stake into the ground on the outside of the form. Be sure to keep the stake vertical and snug against the plywood form with its top edge flush with the form. At the other end of the form, drive a stake so that the form only overlaps it by half. This will allow the next form to butt up against the first one, creating a continuous form. Additional stakes will be needed in between to maintain the desired contour of the border. Stakes can also be used on the inside of the form to maintain proper position, but they should be driven deeper so that the top of the stake is no more than 1 inch above the bottom of the form board. Next, cut some spacers from scrap wood at the desired border width to help position the other side of the form. Place these spacers between the two forms at frequent intervals to keep them parallel and maintain a consistent border width. You can also use spacers temporarily for alignment or leave them permanently in place as long as they're pushed down to the bottom of the form before pouring the concrete. As you attach the forms to the stakes with screws driven from the inside out, you should align the inside and outside forms. This border will have a slight slope down toward the yard. When the forms are complete, you can backfill around them and pour about 1/2 inch of QUIKRETE All-Purpose Gravel into the space. Spread the gravel out evenly inside the forms to prevent concrete from flowing underneath the forms and provide a solid base for the concrete. QUIKRETE Crack-Resistant Concrete in the orange bag is the recommended mix for building concrete borders, but the standard QUIKRETE concrete mix in the yellow bag can also be used. Crack-resistant concrete mix is a high-strength 4,000 psi mix reinforced with special synthetic fibers so it resists shrinkage cracking and has improved impact resistance. This mix also has a superior finish and can be mixed by hand or machine in a barrel-type mixer. Properly mixed concrete should look like thick oatmeal and should hold its shape when squeezed in a gloved hand. Using a shovel, place the concrete mix into the forms so the surface is relatively flat and slightly above the form. Once you have several batches in place, use a float to consolidate and level the surface. Work the mix back and forth across the surface of the concrete to remove excess concrete and smooth the surface. Next, use an edging tool to consolidate and shape the edges of the border, making several passes in each direction. About every 8 feet along the border, cut in control joints with a trowel. These joints allow you to predetermine where the concrete will crack as it shrinks during the curing process or if there is any ground movement. Freshly placed concrete should be water cured for a minimum of 3 to 5 days with a fine water mist. An easier solution, which eliminates water curing, is applying QUIKRETE Acrylic Concrete Cure and Seal immediately after finishing the concrete. Acrylic Cure and Seal can be applied with a roller, garden sprayer, or brush to seal the border and prevent staining from landscaping materials, soil, and mowing. Allow the concrete to cure and gain strength for 3 to 5 days before removing the forms. At 5 days, the concrete mix has only achieved about half of its ultimate strength, so carefully pry away the stakes and remove the plywood forms, but don't use too much force that could crack the new concrete. Once the forms are gone, you can replace the landscaping materials. Your new concrete lawn border will make your landscape more attractive and easier to maintain for years to come.